that we're driven more by the attitudes and whims and opinions of our culture than we are the Word of God. You know, young people, one of the reasons why I'm making this film is I just don't want you to suffer. Unless it's for the cause of Christ. I don't want you to suffer because of sin. You know, I wish that you would learn a healthy dose of fear. I wish that maybe even you were brought into some circumstance where you came so close to danger but didn't go over. Why? So that you would know this is always a possibility. We do so much out of ignorance that harms us in a great way. I remember when my boy Ian, when he was about 4 years old, I took him down into this place. It's kind of the backwaters, swampy area where I used to hunt and play as a little boy. I can't believe my parents would let me run out there all day with a gun, being as young as I was. But I used to hunt back there, and I wanted to take my boy with me and just let him run around. The backwater was up, and so it was pretty swampy, a lot of good things to find, like snakes and turtles and other kinds of animals. And I said, now Ian, you get right beside me. You stay right beside me and you'll be okay, because there's some really big water moccasins in this swamp, and we were wading out in the water and things. And but he was a bold little guy, and he kept getting ahead of me and ahead of me and ahead of me. And I kept saying, now Ian, come back, come back, come back. And he didn't. I mean, he just wanted to be, you know, I don't know. He just wanted to be the great hunter. He wanted to show Dad that he wasn't afraid. And so one time he kept going. It was getting darker, and he kept going. And I thought, okay, young man, here's a lesson that it's going to pain the heart of your father to give you, but you're going to get it. And so when he started off ahead, I just got behind a big cypress tree. And I let him go. I kept him in my eye, made sure that no coyote would come in and grab him or something like that. But I kept him in my eye, and he kept walking, and then he turned around. And it was kind of getting dark, getting a little spooky. The herons were starting to call, and they make a noise that sounds something like a dinosaur. And he started getting scared. And he goes, Dad? And I just stayed there behind the tree. And he said, Dad? And then I waited until his eyes started getting a little bit red. He was about to cry. He was really afraid. And he goes, Dad? And I stepped out behind the tree, and I said, here I am. And he said, I thought you lost me. And I said, no, son, I did not lose you, but you lost me. You were disobedient. And you had to learn. You had to be afraid. Because if you're going to come out here and go into all these different places with Dad, you've got to realize that some of these places aren't very safe. And you're really going to get hurt if you don't follow authority. Now, here's what I want you to see, something very important. We see a whole lot of bad stuff going on here. I mean, they're getting stricken, they're getting beat, their whole head is sick, their heart is faint. There's nothing sound in them from the top of their head to the bottom of their feet. Now, a lot of preachers will tell you that, that this has happened just simply, it's the consequence of their sin. You know, they've done something that was wrong, that was dangerous, and because of that they got hurt, but that's just the way things happen in a fallen world, and God didn't have anything to do with it. Well, there's some truth in that statement sometimes, but that statement basically is heretical. I want you to know, if you're a believer, it's going to be God who strikes you sometimes. It's going to be God who scourges you sometimes. And it's not because His attitude toward you has changed or His love has diminished. No, that was fixed at Calvary. It's because He does love you. He's going to discipline you. He's going to do it. As a matter of fact, if you can wander into sin and there is no discipline from God, it is evidence, according to Hebrews 12, that you're not even a believer. Did you know that? One of the greatest manifestations of God's love toward His children is what? His discipline. Remember, He says, Jacob I loved and Esau I hated? Well, that's true. But if you look at those two persons in the Bible, you begin to ask yourself a question. Well, you know, God promised a lot of things even for Esau, and he fulfilled all of them. As a matter of fact, Esau was so blessed by God that when Jacob came back over into the promised land, he didn't even need Jacob's gift. So how is it that God loved Jacob and demonstrated his wrath towards Esau? Well, here's the answer. God let Esau be Esau. We don't see any case in the Scriptures where God is disciplining Esau, where God is working to change Esau, where God is intervening in his life. No, Esau just went on being Esau. But what do we see in Jacob? I mean, how does God's love manifest in Jacob? Well, it manifests in this way. Well, as my mom used to say, he beat that boy to death. He did. I mean, he disciplined Jacob in every turn of his life, so that when Jacob came back into the promised land, folks, he was limping. He was limping. You know, I've had both hips replaced, and my wife always reminds me, if I wasn't as disobedient as Jacob, God wouldn't have had to touch my hips and make me limp. And she said, I'm even 2 times worse than Jacob. He only had to touch one of Jacob's hips, and he had to touch both of mine. I don't know how much truth is in that, but I do know this. God has disciplined me in my life several times. It's always been because of His love, and it's always led to my good. If you are a believer, if you truly belong to Christ, you're not your own. And He is going to take a hold of you. He is. And man, sometimes, honestly, it'd be better to get in a bear fight. A bear would be much easier to handle. I love what C.S. Lewis says. He's not a tame lion. He's dangerous. He's not safe, but he is good. One of the markings, I think, of at least the old men of God that I used to know is they looked like men who had been mauled by God. And I only hope that happens to you, that you might be conformed to the image of Christ and that you might glow with Him.
Audio Jungle.